Hello and welcome everyone. In this session, we're going to talk about the applied management accounting. This is one of the level 4 paper. So this is relevant to the management accounting. So we're going to look at a few questions from the practice assessment 1 today. So this exam will be a little bit long compared to other exam we have in level 4. So if you have a look, this is the guidance we have here. The exam will be 3 hours to complete, and we have to answer 8 questions. The assessment total marks will be the combination of 140 marks, and we have to score 70% the way we do for all the 8 exam, and the result will be in 6 weeks times. Let's have a look at the question number 1 from this assessment. So we'll start with the first question. Task 1 is for 12 marks. Now this question will be very straightforward. You really don't have to write anything in the exam. This question will be just like a drop down or true and false. So you really don't have to write anything, no calculation. All you have to do this question as soon as possible. Remember that this is the only question that will save a lot of time for you in the exam. So if you can do this question really quick, you will save this time for the next question. So let's have a look what we have here. So this task is about budgetary process, responsibilities, and the uncertainties. Now, of course, like you can see, it's a 12-mark question. So you understand the question will be divided into few parts. So it's not going to be only one question. So let's have a look how many parts we have, and we're going to solve all this question. So it says this task is contained part A to D. You are collecting budget information for the company for which you work. Identify who would be involved in which of the following tasks. Now, very important, you need to understand this one. If you didn't read this chapter, you need to make sure you read it first before you answer this question, because if you don't have enough knowledge in the exam, the question will not exactly will be same. So of course, like you need to know in detail. For example, the first question here, it says task, and it says oversee budget preparation. Now remember that the budget is like the process of few people involvement. It's not only one person who is responsible for the budget. So there are different areas. For example, for the sales, the sales budget need to be prepared for sales budget. So then for the marketing budget need to be prepared. Then for the purchase of material, so purchasing budget need to be prepared. For the production budget need to prepare. So when all this thing we prepare, that's the individual budget. And for each budget there is some responsible person, and we call them budget holder. So for example, for the sales budget, one person or the manager will be responsible to prepare the sales budget, and we call him a budget holder. For the marketing budget, so there will be another budget holder. For each budget, we'll have one budget holder. So once all this individual budget are prepared, then they submit this budget to the budget committee. So budget committee. COMMITTE. So budget committee. Budget committee is like a board. So this board, they oversee the budget. They look after everything. So they want to see what is the resources they included, especially the budget holder, what type of thing they need in the budget. For example, the sales manager said we need this amount of resources, we need this amount of budget, we need to expense this amount of money. So the budget committee has to overlook on everything, and they have to agree this is reasonable. So if they are happy with that, if the budget committee is happy with that, then they incorporate it into the master budget. So they incorporated this budget into master budget. So master budget means like the budget is approved and the budget is ready to go. So this budget later on we prepare in the form of P&L, profit and loss account, or a statement of financial position, or in the cash flow. So you want to see all of this thing. Now if the budget committee, they are not agree with any budget, or if they decline the budget, then the budget holder, they have to make the correction, and they have to give the explanation why they need this sort of resources. Now in the budget committee, who sit in the budget committee? In the budget committee, there are two group of people sit here. So the senior executives, so that means the senior employees of the company, and the budget accountant. So the budget accountant is the person who help the budget community to make the budget accurate and to help to make the budget best for the organization with the minimum effort or the minimum cost. So this is a little bit understanding of the budget, because in the exam you are not expecting the same questions, so you have to make sure you understand how does it work. All right, so let's back to the question now. So if you go back to the question, we like to see here what's happening. So let's have a look. So you want to just clear, and the first one is oversee the budget preparation. Remember that oversee or look after the budget is the responsibility of the budget committee. So budget committee are the people who are responsible to look at the individual budget that prepared by the budget holder. So they're the ultimate people. Budget committee, they oversee the budget, and they are the people who approve the budget if everything okay with that. Assist in budget preparation. So there is a two group of people. They basically help to make the budget incorporated into master budget, and there are two group of people. One is the senior management and also the budget accountant, because without the budget accountant help, the senior management will not understand the accounting terms. For that reason, it's very important the budget accountant tell this figure is accurate, this is the calculation. For example, when a manager or when a budget holder revise any sort of budget, for example, last year the purchase cost was £10 per kilo. Now they revise the standard because of the inflation or rate of interest. So the budget accountant check this figure and see this amount is accurate or not, because if the budget holder prepare the budget that is very easy to achieve, there will be no more motivation. So the senior management, normally they don't know how does it work. So the budget accountant help the senior management to identify what is the rate of inflation, what is the rate of interest, so that they see the figure are accurate, so they understand the budget holder or the management, they are not intentionally prepare the budgetary slack. Budgetary slack means putting the extra resources in the budget so that the budget will be easy to achieve, and sometimes the management performance or the bonus depends on the budget. So this sort of advantage the management want to take. For that reason, sometimes they try to put more resources so that the budget will be easy for them to achieve. So for that reason, the budget accountant always help the senior management in order to prepare the budget. The next one we have here, it says identify the individual or group that you will need to contact for information about each of the following tasks. So the first one we have here, draft the direct material budget. So you can see that direct material, of course, the material is the link with two persons who buy the material and who use the material. So if you have a look here, who buy the material is purchased by the purchase manager. So there is two things here. When you look at this one, direct materials, you need to understand the material is purchased by someone, so that is the purchase manager, and also later on this material is used by someone, that's the production department. So these two people are responsible for the budget or the draft the direct material budget, because the production manager need to tell the purchase manager we need that quantity of the material. For example, the production manager tell the purchase manager we need 100 kilo material, and based on that the purchase manager buy 100 kilo, because the purchase manager have no idea how many quantity they have to buy for the production, and the production manager, they get this information from the sales manager, so that based on the sales demand, the production department give the instruction to the purchase department so that they can buy or purchase this material. All right, so we understand here there is two people involved here, production manager and the purchase manager. Agree, planning, assumption. Remember that if you see this word agree, that means it is the budget committee. So budget committee is the ultimate people, or like a board or like a group. They are the people who accept the budget, who approve the budget. So they have to be agree with the planning assumption. So planning assumption, what does that mean? Planning assumption, the word represent planning assumption is like you cannot just say like the budget will be prepared after the year. So we already know budget means something we plan for the future. So budget means something we're going to do in future. So when we're going to do something in the future, so that is basically assumption. So assumption we are making for the future. Planning is something we're doing right now for the future in advance. So of course, if we make the assumption, for example, you are thinking maybe the rate of interest will increase and rate of inflation will increase. For that reason, I have showing the more price for the material purchase. Now the budget committee has to agree that like, okay, your assumption is correct. Now remember that if something come very suddenly, we cannot consider that in the budget preparation. For example, the COVID. So we cannot make the assumption like next year will be there is another COVID. So uncertainty cannot be considered in the budget. So uncertainty is something that we keep the provision on the financial statement. So sometimes if we think there could be a penalty, there could be something that we don't know, so sometimes the company can keep a provision for that in the financial statement, but you cannot include this in the budget because there is no basis for that. All right, so here we go. So this is our next one. We move to the next one. So the next one we have here is says identify the most appropriate treatment for each of the following cost. So here we're looking at the categories of the cost. Now remember that we have admin cost and we have a production cost, we have a direct cost, we have indirect cost. Now indirect cost also consider as a overhead. So if something is basically cannot be traced in the product, for example, let's try to understand. Let's say we are the people who make the pen and we sell the pen, and for example this is a pen, and in this pen we use the plastic and we use ink, and for example someone need to make this pen and he used for example 10 minutes to make one pen. So all these things are traceable. So I can see how much plastic here, for example 10 gram, how much ink here, for example 10 gram, and how long it takes to make one pen is 10 minutes. So all these are traceable, all these are identifiable. So when something is traceable and identifiable, remember that this is a direct cost. This is the direct cost. Now if something is not possible to identify directly, for example, if I like to say how much electricity we use to make this pen, because we definitely need the heat and lighting when you make the pen, so we cannot say exactly how much it is. So this is the indirect cost. For example, when you sell the pen, there are some people who work behind, for example the finance department or the accountant or the lawyer. So this sort of people also like relevant with this company. For that reason we call it admin cost. So this is the admin. And the same way we have operating cost. For example, if we have a distribution cost, we need to hire or rent a storage. All these things are relevant with the same company, but some of the costs are direct, some of the costs are indirect. We have to understand that. So here if you look at the first one, the office is stationary. Stationary, always we need to allocate. Remember that the word allocate and apportion we should know by this time. Allocate and apportionment. Allocate means I know this cost belongs to that department. For example, if I need to pay salary to the department A, so I say this salary belongs to department A. But for example, if a company have a 3 department A, B and C, and the rent total is £9,000, the rent, that means we cannot give all this rent to department A, B or C. The rent need to be apportioned. So this one is called apportionment when we cannot allocate. So when the cost is belongs to more than one department or one product, we have to apportion it. So obviously like we cannot allocate it. So when we know this cost belongs to that department, we call it allocate. If we cannot determine it, we call it reapportionment. So let's have a look. This question now is the office stationery, so it belongs to admin department. We can allocate, we know this cost belongs to admin, so allocate to admin overhead. Production labor, sick pay, remember that sick pay is not the basic pay, sick pay is the overhead, and of course like sick pay or idle payment or overtime premium, this sort of thing goes under the indirect cost. So you need to look at the overhead. So charge to production based on a labor overhead rate, so that is also belongs to the production cost, but it will be treated as a overhead. Production labor basic pay, this is the direct pay, remember that, the people who work to make the product. So we need to say charge to production directly. And then store department, remember this is the service department, because later on the service department cost has to be reallocated or reapportioned to the production department, because the service department, they don't have any individual income, so all this income belongs to the production department. So the service department cost is store or maintenance, any sort of cost later on need to reapportion to the production department. So we'll say allocate to the production overhead. All right, the next one we have here, complete the following statement about the budgets. Detailed budget prepared by the production manager are referred to as, remember that if the budget is prepared by the production manager, this is the budget we called bottom-up budget. So it is prepared by the production manager. That means the people who will execute the budget, for example the operational people, if they prepare the budget, we called it bottom-up budget, because the budget is prepared by the people who actually do the work. But if the budget is prepared by the senior management who's sitting in the top level, the strategic people, we called it top-down budget. So here it is bottom-up, so we're going to say it is a bottom-up budget. And then budget, and then usually have a, remember that if the budget is prepared by the operational people who actually do the work, they feel motivated, they feel like, oh, we are the people going to work on this budget, so if we are involved on the budget preparation, they feel like part of the budget. But if the budget come from the strategic people, suddenly the budget come to them and say you have to do it, they feel like demotivated, they feel like, okay, we are not part of the budget, someone just like pressuring us to do the work, maybe sometime this budget is not possible to achieve, so they don't feel motivated. Normally the bottom-up budget always motivate the managers, and of course like this will help the budget holder. They are brought together to form the master budget. So the final budget together when everything is ready, so make it together, we called it master budget. So let's read once again. It's a detailed budget prepared by the production manager are referred to as bottom up, because the production manager are the operational people who is responsible to prepare the budget, and usually have a motivating effect on the budget holder. So budget holder means like who is responsible for the budget. They feel good, like, okay, I'm preparing the budget, and of course like I'm part of this budget, and they are brought together to form the master budget. That's our first question. Remember that knowledge is very important. You need to read a lot from the book. Do not depend only the practice assessment, because in the exam the question will be opposite, so it will be different. The pattern will be same, the way it is look like it will be same, but the question will not be same. For that reason you have to read a lot, and if you understand it, it's not going to be difficult to answer any question for task 1. All right, so let's move on to our next task. Let's have a look what we have on the question number 2. The next question we have here for 24 marks, so task 2. So let's read this question. This question will be the combination of our calculation and the writing part as well. So let's have a look. So this task is about budget preparation, evaluation, and the revision. This task contains part A to C. And here it says O Limited is preparing its resources budget for the next period and has the following data: production budget and the unit. So let's have a look. So the production budget, we can see we have here opening inventory finished good 13,100, production 140,000 unit, subtotal 18700, sales 170,000, and the closing inventory finished good 17,100. Now it's very important to read every single line very carefully. Remember that the first thing you have to understand the difference between the raw material and the finished good. So the finished good is a complete product, it's a complete unit, and the raw material is not complete. So when we looking at the value for the raw material and the finished good, we do not use the same price. We need to be very careful with that. Now here, this one is the production budget, and the production budget represents the complete unit. But later on, when you're going to prepare the material budget or the labor budget, remember that that is not the complete. So this is the individual budget, like the budget prepared by the budget holder. So it says on the note, material, each unit produce require 0.6 kilogram of material. To make 1 unit, we need 0.6 kilogram of material. Closing inventory will be valued at the budgeted price per kilo. So all the closing inventory is going to value at the budgeted price per kilo. We need to find it out how much is the budgeted price per kilo. For the labor, it says each item will take 5 minutes to produce. Now when you see the item, remember that minute, so we need to multiply with the number of unit, and later on we have to come back with the hour by divide by 60. 82 staff each work 120 basic hour in the period. The reason they give this information to us because they like to see how much is the total hour and how many hours is the basic. And of course the difference between will be the overtime. So overtime is paid at 50% above basic rate. Okay, then you have a production overhead. A variable overhead is based on the total labor hours. So when you have a variable overhead that will be calculated based on the total labor hour. Okay, now we have two workings here. So we have one for the materials and one we have for the labor. So let's try to do it. The first one we have here, we can see we have a opening inventory. So that's for the raw material only. That's not for the closing or the complete product. Remember that this is only for the material. So the material represent opening inventory 4400 and the price 5280. The purchase 1.25 per kilo. We don't know how many kilogram we have to buy. We need to calculate it. Used in the production. Closing inventory, and this is again only for the material. Then we have a labor, basic, overtime, and the total. Let's do the first one first. So the first one, it says for the material we need 6 kilogram material to make 1 unit. So how many unit we are making here? Our production is 174,000 unit. So let's do the workings now. So for 174,000 unit, and per unit we need 0.6 kilograms. So we need total how many kilogram? That's what we are going to calculate. So 174,000 multiply 0.6. So total we will need 104,400. So this amount of material we need. Now we need to see how many kilogram we already have. So you already have 4,400 kilos. So 4,400 kilo we already have. So we don't need to buy that. So it's a minus or less 4,400. That's opening. We already have in the stock in the warehouse. So we really don't have to buy it. But at the end of the year or at the end of the period, we like to keep 3,700 as a closing. That means after you use all this material in the production, we still want something will be on the warehouse, that is 3,700 kilos. So we want to check how many kilo then I have to buy. So we see here 104,400. We already have 4,400, so minus 4,400, plus we like to keep 3,700 on the closing. So then it represent I have to buy 103,700. 103,700 kilo. So if I buy this amount of kilo, what will happen after using in the production? I will still have 3,700 on the warehouse. So I'll say here I need to buy 103,700 kilo, and the per kilo is 1.25. So if you multiply 1.25, so that will give me, multiply 1.25, that gives me 129,625. 129,625. So 129,625. And now we have the three amount here, so opening, purchase, and the closing. Now I can easily find the difference, the production. If we have one figure missing, you can always find it out. So how we find it out? So we have 4,400 is the opening, and in the production we have 103,700, and on the closing we need 3,700. So how much we used on the production? So let's try to understand once again. We already have 4,400, and we have purchased another 103,700 kilo, and we want closing inventory at the end of the period 3,700. So how many kilo actually used on the production? So we do 4,400 plus 103,700 minus 3,700. So in the production we have used 104 and 400. So we do 104, 400. This calculation you have to do ourselves. It will be not depends on any working. So once we have the other calculation, we can find the missing one. The same way we do for this one. So 5,200 was the value, 5,280, 129,625, and then minus 4,625, and that will give me 130,280. So 130,280, and that's our material budget. It is done. The next one we have working schedule for the labor. Now the working schedule for the labor, we need to find how many hours. So if you remember, our total production was 174,000. So 174,000, and we need to see how many minutes we need to make one unit. So if you remember, it's a 5 minutes to make one unit. So multiply by 5, so it will tell me how many minutes I need. So 174,000 multiply 5, I need 87,000 minute. But as all the workings we're going to do as hour, so we need to divide with 60 to find it out how many hours. Divide by 60, so convert into hours. So we need total 14,500 hours. So total 14,500 hours we need to complete this 174,000 unit production. Now this hours we need total for the labor. Now it says 82 staff work 120 basic hour. So we need to find it out how much is the total basic, because out of total hour we have a basic hour and the rest will be the overtime, because the rate for the overtime and the basic is not same. So let's have a look. So 82 is staff multiply 120 hour. So 82 multiply 120, and that gives me 9,840 hours is our basic. So if you find the difference now, 9,840 minus 14,500, and this difference will be the overtime hour. So the overtime we have 4660. Now we have to multiply with the rate. We have to multiply with the rate. Now the basic rate and the overtime rate is different. The question already gave us the basic rate, and the basic rate is £9 per hour. So multiply by 9 per hour. So that will give me 9,840 multiply 9. That will give me 88,560. So 88,560. That's my total basic pay. And the overtime hour, they said 50% above of the basic hourly rate. That's times and half. So 9 multiply times and half. So 9 multiply times and half, that is 13.5. So 13.5 is the overtime rate. So 13.5 multiply 4660, and that gives me 62,910. So 62,910. So now we need to just complete the table. So we say the total basic hour is 9,840, and the amount is 88,560, and then the overtime is 4660, and the amount is 62,910. The total should be 14,500 hours and 151,470. That's just the total. All right, so we have done our part A, the calculation part. So now we can move to our next part, that will be part B. So let's move on. The next part, we have the writing task. So let's try to write it down. It's for 4 marks only, so we need to make only 4 points. Okay, it says O Limited is looking to complete the sales budget for the next year. So looking at the sales budget for the next year, for 1 year. Identify 4 factors. How many? 4 factors that could limit the total sales. Very important word, limit total sales in the sales budget. So basically they are saying, even though we have a demand, but what is the factors that could reduce the sales? Or we can say, what is the limitation that we cannot fulfill this budget or the demand? So we are looking at the disadvantage. We are looking at some factors. Because of that, maybe I'll not be able to complete this sales budget or the sales demand. So again, it is all the assumption. So the budget is based on the assumption, and also this is also my assumption. We need to say maybe because of this reason the sales demand will not be fulfilled or the sales budget will not be fulfilled. So we need to say there are a variety of factors that could limit the overall sales demand. So we need to say only 4 factors. So the 4 factors, you can use this word in the as the opening, as the introduction. You can say there are a variety of factors that could limit the sales demand, and after that you can start. You can put number 1, number 2, 3, 4, or you can just make the point just 1 dot and start. That doesn't make any difference, but it is nice to write number 1, 2, 3, 4 because they said 4 factors. So you can say 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the first one we like to say the production capacity. Production capacity. that means it is possible will not be able to produce whatever is the demand. It could be for any reason. For example, there is a breakdown of the machine. For example, you don't have enough skilled labor. For example, the resources you need to produce 174,000 units, you don't have enough capacity. For any reason, if the production capacity don't have enough to fulfill the demand, so you cannot fulfill the demand. So this is the first factor. Because of that, maybe I'll not be able to fulfill the demand. So that's the first one, production capacity. The next one we can say, now we give the breakdown. So breakdown of what? Breakdown. If we like to make some unit, if we like to make some production, we need few things for every single product. We need a material, we need a labor. So this is the one very common you can use in any question. So we can say availability of the raw material. So availability of raw material, because for some reason if we don't find enough material outside, we'll not be able to complete the demand. Then same thing, availability of skilled labor, skilled and unskilled labor, and because of the financial limitation for any reason, or we can say cash flow shortage or working capital shortage. Because for any reason, if we have a shortage of money, we will not be able to fulfill the demand. So if you can remember this four factor for any question, you can use this, because it's like a default answer. You don't have to be linked with the scenario at all. Alright, so we have get 4 marks. We'll get 4 out of 4 because of the words identified. Remember that if the question is identify, do not explain. You don't have to write, you don't have to say anything, just to identify. So this is the easy way to pick the mark. When you read the question, you need to understand what the question asking. Is the question asking for identify? If the question asking for explain, is the question asking for evaluate? If the question asking for critically discuss or find the pros and cons, it's very important to see what question is asking. Alright, so we are happy with that. The next one, we like to move on. The next question also relevant to our writing task. So let's have a look. So O Limited has now completed the sales budget, which show a 15% volume increase in sales for the next year. O Limited has produced the following draft overhead budget together with the budgetary assumptions used and comparative figure for the previous year. So they are showing the comparative from the previous year and also showing the budget for this year. And they're using the assumption. Assumption means like why they are telling us this year the cost will be this. So this is the assumption they're making based on the previous year budget. Okay, let's have a look. So the first one is says here factory rent. So the last year the factory rent was 50,000 previous year, and this year the rent is 55, only increased by 5,000. You can see here the sales we are expecting will be increased by 15%. So the sales volume is increasing by 15%. That means all the variable cost should increase by 15%. Now the rent is a fixed cost, it's not a variable cost, but if we have to make 15% more production volume, or if we need to make more 15% unit, then we might need more space, we might need bigger building, we need a bigger space. So for that reason maybe the rent will increase. Now we need to read the requirement a little bit, what they're asking. The requirement is asking evaluate the draft overheads budget taking into consideration the assumption used in the preparation. So basically we need to evaluate this assumption. We need to find it out or raise the question mark how they make this assumption, or is there anything we like to add on the assumption. So for example, we will say like the budget has been increased by 10% for the additional space. Then we need to raise some question like, will space be available at the same rent to our existing agreement, or it will be with a new agreement, it will be more or less. Or then you can raise some question, will there be additional payment recurring in the first year. So we need to raise some question like, okay, we make the assumption, the budget holder make the assumption that the next period it will be increased by 10%, and we can see the sales volume will be increased by 15. So we need to raise some question and we need to evaluate like how accurate this assumption is. This is our main target here. So we need to evaluate each of these: factory rent, then factory insurance, admin, sales and marketing, distribution, and head office, all of this. Now it's a 12 marks question. We need to write at least 12 sentences. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we need to write at least 2 for each of these. So let's write it down. So the first one, we need to write it down for the rent. So we can say here only 10% increased compared to last year. So this is the first one based on the assumption. Then we want to say some like, we want to raise some question. So we say is it enough for the company to fulfill 15% additional sales demand? Because the sales is increasing by 15%, so the 10% of the factory space will be enough to fulfill the demand. So this is the first one we're asking. Then is there will be any additional payment for first year or later year? Because when you increase the space, maybe the agreement say, okay, you don't have to pay right now, not much, but next year it will be increased. So you need to know, is there any additional clause for that? Then is there any changes with the previous rental agreement? So you're asking like, when you renew the lease, so the terms and condition is still same or we have a new one? So we need to know. So we need to basically evaluate, we need to raise some question, but whatever the assumption the budget holder is saying here. The next one, it says factory insurance. This one is same, so no increase. First we need to write what's happening, so you need to say no increase incorporated or no increase considered in the assumption. So no increase considered in the assumption. This is the first thing we need to write, what's happening between these two budget, because it will give us easy 1 marks. So then the next question we are saying, if we take 10% more space, the insurance should also increase, because if we now have a more space, the insurance cost should increase. So we need to raise this question. So we say, if we take more space, will insurance not increase? So if we take more space, Will insurance cost not increase? So asking this question. And then we need to say, are we expecting a better deal? So asking this question, like, how come the space is increasing but the insurance is not increased? So we are expecting a better deal. The admin cost is jumping from 42 to 48. So I need to say what's happening. We need to say it's increased by 6,000. So increase by 6,000 compared to last year. Then we need to see what is the combination of admin cost. What is the combination of admin cost? That means the variable and the fixed. Because if the variable cost increased by 15%, then we need to see how much is the admin cost increase, and that is increase from 42 to 48. So I need to say, like, is it reasonable? So we will say, are we expecting the fixed cost will be increased significantly? Because we can see here variable cost is only increasing by 15%. Now here on the assumption it says half of the admin cost are fixed with the remainder variable. So that means on 42,000, 21 is variable and 21 is fixed. Now if you look at the calculation, so 21,000, if the variable, if we increase by 15%, then it will be 24,150. That means out of 48,000, if 24,150 is the variable, then rest is the fixed. That means the fixed cost increasing significantly. Because if the half of the costs are variable, then it should increase by only 15%, because the sales volume increase only 15%. So you have to discuss that. Then you have a sales and marketing. From 63,000 to 80,000 is a new marketing manager is to be employed at a cost of 27,000 per year. That means from 63 to 80. That's the reason the sales and marketing costs increase. So we need to say what is increasing. So we need to say from 63 to 80. 80 minus 63, 17,000. So sales and marketing cost increased by 17,000. You can show the percentage if you like. That will give you some mark as well. And 17,000, but they said the new manager will cost 27,000. So if the last year it is 63, it should be added 27,000 because the new manager will have additional cost. But they make from 63 to 80, that increased by only 17,000. So that doesn't look like reasonable. How they cover the cost? So it says increase, however, does not cover the cost of the new manager. So increase does not cover the full cost for the new manager. So we need to say, is the business reducing other marketing activities? Because if the business is still doing the same marketing activity like before, then this 27,000 for the new manager, it should be added, but it's not adding, so that doesn't make any sense. Distribution cost 22 to 29. Distribution costs are variable costs, so it should increase by only 15%. So it's increased by how much? 29 minus 22, that's 7,000. So distribution cost increased by 7,000. And of course, like, we need to say, as the sales increase by 15%, all the variable cost should increase by 15%, because it cannot be increased by more than that. Here it is increased a lot. Distribution cost increase 7,000. That means 7,000 divide 22,000 times 100 is almost 32%. So increase by 32%. So this doesn't look like reasonable, and we have to ask the question, like, have the cost of distribution increased significantly? Finally, the head office cost 102 to 105. Head office will relocate during the year to a larger site. So if they move to the larger site, 3,000 will be enough. This is the first question. So a small increase on the last year, would expect significant cost to be increased. So we'll say only increase by 3,000. Then we'll say large office should increase more cost. Then you can say, are we expecting better deal? So you are not saying anything you're right or wrong, but we are basically discussing all the props and cons. This is the evaluation, the assumption of the budget. All right, I think that's all. If you can write all of this thing, we'll get absolutely full marks for this question. All right, so we will stop here today, and on the next session I'll try to prepare the next task. So that will be our task 3 and 4. Maybe try to do next task on the next session. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any question, feel free to email me. I'll try to help you if I can. Thank you.